Hi guys, Brett here from Hearns Hobbies, and today I would like to take a look at servicing and repairing, including maintenance, of the HR1 Buggy. So if you've been following this will be the third installment of this rebuild process, I suppose you call it. So the first one was about stripping it down, taking the front clip off, the rear clip off, and the center diff out. While the center diff was out, I actually rebuilt that on camera, so you can have a look at that one. The second one was all about servicing and rebuilding the rear clip. The rear clip includes the rear suspension module, the bearings, the drive shafts, the gearbox, and the diff. And then if you notice, I actually re-shimmed it just at the last step, which is really sort of not that common. But yeah, so we did actually even do a little bit of re-shimming, and the transmission is beautiful. You'll notice now that I've gone up from 3,000 to 5,000 weight 9-step oil, which will hopefully be really good in the heat of summer here in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah, the gearbox is really nice, the bearings are good. The only thing I haven't done yet is lubricate it, and I haven't lubricated it because I don't want stuff to get stuck in there. So while it's all nice and dry, I'm just going to leave it, but I will lubricate it, the gear set, the rear gearbox, when it comes time to mate it back up to the chassis. So yeah, so really nice suspension, no squeaks, everything's really free. The gearbox is really nice, fresh diff, really happy with that. Okay, so we've still got the center here that really hasn't been touched since we stripped it. That can sit out the way. The rear one can sit out the way. Now, let's get started on the front one. Now, much like the rear one, it's exactly the same process. So I'm going to do it exactly the same way. This one does have a little bit more complication because of the steering assembly. So I will be checking the steering spindles and also rebuilding, relubing the front CV drive shafts. So they're really nice. I'm going to zoom in there actually. So you can see the drive shafts, they're really nice. You can see it straight from the track, like I said. It's actually just come back from Townsville. But yeah, really nice and free. Again, it's not squeaking like the back end. It's dropping under its own weight, but I'm sure that we will find it. Still got copper grease in there. And while I'm in here, I will also rebuild the front differential unit. Okay, let's make a start. So I suppose the first thing I like to do is in fact start cleaning it down. So I'm just going to wipe a bit of the bulk grease off to avoid introducing any new contaminants in. And again, I'll do exactly the same thing as the last one. I'm just going to seal up the gearbox, and just with a little bit of blue tack like that, it's going to ensure that I can't actually wash any grease into there. Now, you know how I work, you know I don't like to use compressed air and simple green and that sort of stuff if I can help it. So just the old-fashioned way with an old, well this is a Aromax cleaning brush to get away the bulk of the dirt and grime. And then we will clean the components as we go. So I'm going to take the front suspension unit off of the gearbox, service the front suspension, service disassemble the gearbox. I'm going to service the differential, so strip it down, clean it, rebuild it, then redo the gearbox and attach the suspension. And then that will be the front clip done. See there, just a pretty general wipe over. You can leave the blue tack on there. So again, I like to start from the turnbuckles, flop all that out of the way. I've got my 2.5mm 9-steps driver, made it to the 5.5mm. Again, a handy little tip I like to do is just to leave the bolts in there. And while I'm doing that, it looks like I'm just simply taking the bolts out, but I'm actually rotating it, and I can feel whether they're bent or not. So these buggies take an absolute walloping, so it's very good to note whether there is any bend in the bolts or anything that needs work at this point. A, so you can get your shopping list together, and B, so everything, you know everything's going to go nice. What's going on here? Here we go. Must have had the nut in the tool a little bit crooked. So, and I know exactly where it's going to go on the roll center adjustment as well. Go ahead now and take the sway bar off. And the reason I take the sway bar off is so I can adjust it later. And again, I can see here, make sure it's not bent and buckled. It's all nice and smooth. And much like the front one, I'm going to take the A block off, the front block, and leave the B block, the rear block on. So that is going to hold the diff caps in situ. So go ahead and undo these. These should be some really long screws because they hold the two gear cases, the front and the rear gear case together over the diff. Now I'll be really interested to see the rear differential was in really good condition. And this one I'm expecting the same, because if any diff is going to be overworked, it's usually going to be your center or your rear. And the fact that it had 3K in there, that was really nice, is a good indicator. So I think 3K was really good through Melbourne winter and a loose track that we were running at. So that's pretty, I'm pretty confident that that was the right setting. And I've gone up to 5K in the rear, a little bit thicker, 5,000 weight, 9 steps oil, and in the hope that that will get us through summer. But we'll see, we can always change it on the day too if we have to. You can see here a little bit of squeaking, a little bit dry, but the reason that I'm actually spinning it over is to make sure that they're not bent. Because if the hinge pin is bent, it's now when you'll see it, because you'll see movement in the pivot. But the hinge pins are really nice, so it looks like I'm just playing around, but I'm actually evaluating for bent hinge pins. And they're really nice how they do up on the shoulder of the hinge pin with the HR1. It's a really good design philosophy. And much like the rear, you have to pay attention to the suspension pills. However, there's only suspension pills in the rear or the B block. So see, the whole front suspension now comes out of the way, leaving us with the gearbox, which is all held together nice and secure. The only thing that can come out now is in fact these pill blocks. And I'm going to zoom in there. So you can see on the pill block, there's 3 dots facing up, and that is part of the kick up adjustment. So you're adjusting the kick up, which is the hinge pin inclination towards the front end. So I'm just going to pop these out now. So 3 pins up, 3 dots up, and that is so I can clean the suspension block down after. So what I'm going to do is, again, going to offer it up with a little bit of brush, and I like to clean it before I remove the gearbox, before I remove the diff assembly out, just to make sure that I'm not introducing any more dirt in at a later stage through the servicing procedure. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and spray a little bit of WD-40 onto a toothbrush, and that is actually just going to clean and scrub my alloy suspension block and a little bit on my front shock tower. And that's going to make it gleam, absolutely. So I'm not going to flood it. But what the WD-40 does is just act like a little bit of degreaser, and helps break it down. Again, just a little bit of presentation, just like so. Then I'll immediately get a rag and wipe it all off, like so. And I really want to clean the suspension block to make sure that those little peels that I just took out actually go in nice and straight and square. And not only is our wheel alignment going to maintain correct, It's also going to give us a nice good quality build with no friction. It's got the old blue tack in there, any dirt and rubble out of the way, and I'll do that across the gearbox housing as well. Just pushing it in. And it's really nice to service your cars in this way instead of just blowing dirt into everything with a high pressure air gun, as most people I see tend to do. But that ensures that I'll be able to hopefully use the same bearings. We'll see when we take it apart. There we go. Front gearbox housing. This can go to the side for the moment. All nice and clean and awaiting further attention. Let's have a look at the front suspension unit. And this is going to be a little bit in depth. Okay, let me get a bit of focus on here. So, got our top turnbuckle looking really good. Nothing's loose at the top there. We've got our spindle, so we're going to have a look at our kingpin here, make sure nothing's broken or bent. There's not a lot of play in there, which is really nice. Everything's pivoting good. The drive shafts, although they are dirty, are actually working really nice and smooth, which is a good indicator. And I did check for bends. Now there is a slight bend on one of them, but that's pretty typical of an 8 scale buggy. So I'm just going to do one side at a time. Okay, so let's start by taking this hinge pin off. I did have my favorite 9 steps Phillips head screwdriver here. I wouldn't be surprised if I came across a bent hinge pin. And you can see here is a perfect example of a bent hinge pin. That's exactly what it looks like. See, it's got that little bit of doesn't look like much. See, it's got that little bit of a bend. That is something that we will rectify. So I'll go to the spare parts bin and I will replace that with a brand new hinge pin. You can sometimes straighten them out. I won't in this case. But yeah, nice simple design, but yeah, it does have a little bend in it. So it's had a big knock. So the rest of the arm itself is pretty good condition. It's not buckled, hasn't lost its integrity. Sometimes if people put them into a ultrasonic cleaner, a heated ultrasonic cleaner, it can in fact effectively boil the plastic, the nylon in the plastic, making it a lot more flexible than it ever was. And the plastics do degrade over time. They do definitely fatigue. So all I'm doing here is I've got my 9-step sanding stick on 800 grit, and I'm just cleaning up the surface faces of the pivot points. And that's to make sure, I'm not trying to remove any material, just making sure that they are nice and flat and in fact polished for that really smooth suspension movement, actuation. Here we go. Like so. I'm really happy with that. Is looking good. I'm going to give that a bit of a final spruce up here with the toothbrush. And it's this looking and evaluating on strip down that can often reveal a lot of problems and a lot of pain points that you can avoid moving forward, costing you DNFs, broken buggies, and general heartache. Really happy with that. We'll use that arm for sure. Now, how does the front left suspension assembly look? So, much like the other side, to get the drive shaft of the stub axle out, I'm going to use my 9 steps wheel nut driver. That's because it's got a pin here that goes through and it's retained by a grub screw. So that 2.5mm driver straight down the guts, lock it into situ, nice and firm. That pin wasn't going to fall out, that's for sure. Then we'll put this one to the side. See, there's the grub screw. put it over here to the side of my mat. Then we can take the pin out, take the hex off, and you shouldn't have to be using hammers and chisel at any parts of your repairs. Then the drive shaft comes out. Really, really nice looking drive shaft. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Now I'm going to take the steering spindle off of the caster block and make sure that there's no cracks or movement in the plastic. So just have to be a little bit cautious when you do this. Make sure that your screws are coming out top and bottom and you remember which one's which. Again, I'm not using any power tools, preferring to do it by hand. And that should now just slide away. Should just slide away, here we go, slide away like that. Revealing our caster block assembly over here and our steering block. So, going to have a closer look at the caster block, checking for any damage, any cracks. Just giving it a really good sort of thorough look over as I'm cleaning it. Because if there's any damage, this is the point where I want to find it. And I can see here that they are adjustable somewhat because it does have 17L written on it, and that is in relation to your caster angle. So it's a 17-degree caster block, which is yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but it's definitely a setting. But if you went to 22 degrees or 12 degrees, 5 degrees either side, you would notice a handling characteristic change to tunability. It is a race buggy after all, the HR1. Okay, then at this point I'll put the hinge pin back through, making sure we've got nice movement, which we do. No dirt and grime in there. And again, just with the surface area of the pivot point, making sure that I do have a nice contact patch. Not trying to remove material, just make sure that it is nice, and really happy with that caster block. Really strong unit. It might be plastic, but it is good plastic. And then I can go ahead and take the buckets out of the steering spindle. You just have to be mindful that sometimes they are different heights. So I'm keeping it all together. And this one here, I can confirm they are in fact the same height. And then, because there's bearings here, I'm actually going to get my blue tack, and in this case I'll take the bearings out of the plastic, which will enable me to clean it and check the bearings all at the same time. So, and I can tell that this is the left side of the car because I'm only doing one side, but it was also marked left. So if you do happen to take it all apart, you can notice that they're both left and right, to aid in spare parts if you've got your spare parts bin, or in fact your replacing parts. I'm just doing this to clean everything as I go, to hopefully reveal any defects if there are any. And it's all looking really, really nice. No cracks. That doesn't mean that there won't be the first time we use it. It's always the way after you do a big rebuild. Okay. Just dummy fitting it back up. And I can in fact put these screws back in, being really cautious not to over tighten anything, and make sure that they are nice and true when I am doing them up. Actually, it might be this point here. Sorry, before I put that together, I will in fact put Sorry. All these little hats. I will in fact put the bearings in. So that's going to, again, just with the blue tack, making sure they're nice and smooth. I can put it on the CV drive shaft. Nice and smooth, no noise, no crunch. That can go straight back in. I don't like to add any oil or grease at this part of the bearing cleaning. It's as simple as either replacing them or not, and in this case not. They're going straight back in. Just put this inner one in case it is in fact retained partially by the caster block. Again, you don't want to be rushing anything, making sure that all the threads are going in really nice. Nice big, what looks like 3.5mm threads here on these caster blocks. It's not going to rattle loose, so it's important that you take that into consideration, that you're not trying to really like wrench on it and torque it up. Just pulling it up flush. Look at that. That is beautiful. Beautiful free action. We can go ahead now and put this outer race in. And at this point, I will start servicing the drive shaft, which is going to include wiping off all of the excess dirt. I'm going to disassemble the drive shaft here and use a little bit of WD-40 as a solvent, because it is an all metal part. I'm not using it as a lubrication, but yes, as a solvent. Now the CVs have a little 2mm grub screw in them. It's really important that this grub screw gets Loctited, because they are prone on CVs to letting you down just when you least expect it, but the Loctite will ensure. Push the pin out. And the thing I like about CV drive shafts over universals or dog bones is that they are fully rebuildable. And again, you can see the dirt and grime. I'm going to clean off the grub screw first foremost. So the dirt and grime in here is actually what wears them. So you do have to use a little bit of lubrication, and that lubrication can in fact attract dust and grit, and then that dust and grit combined with your lubrication turns into a grinding paste and in fact wears them out. So it's important that you service them and put clean lubrication in there every so often. If you just keep putting drops of oil in there, okay, you're keeping it lubricated, but you're also creating an environment that's really going to cause a lot of wear and tear. And again, the blue tack doing an amazing job of removing all that rubbish off there. Using the silicone mat itself to actually polish up the pin like an eraser. Have a look at that beautiful chrome pin. Looking for flat spots and wear. Then you've got the bone again. The handy thing with CVs is when you do, or if and when you bend a drive shaft, and it's not likely that you're really going to bend a HR1 anytime soon with any great gusto, because they are like a 5mm bone. It's the very fact that you can just replace the bone. You don't have to buy a whole drive shaft or a whole pair of drive shafts. But most people will anyway. It's a simple and And what I'm looking for here on the bone is making sure that there is no grub left behind. So I'll get my WD-40, and that's not acting as a lubrication, that's acting as a solvent to clean everything. So then what I'm going to want to do is wipe that off. Perfect. And these are going to be buttery smooth. Yes, they do take a little bit of time, and you can dummy fit it up, put the barrel in there. You can check for play, so you have play as it wears across the barrel, which there is none. You can get wear in the stub axle, where is it? And these holes here. And they give you 2 sets of holes to use, so the pin that acts on these holes can elongate it, creating slop. And like I said, you get wear in the barrel and the bone, but this one that really does have none. It's barely even polished up, which is nice. I'm really happy with that. So this is again a perfect example of a fully rebuildable drive shaft. And if more cars had these, more people would be enjoying their hobby. So again, I don't absolutely coat it in grease. It's just about getting it into the areas where, and I actually go to great lengths to wipe off all the excessive grease as well. So put the grease in, then I'm going to press the barrel in. Like so, holding my finger on the back, because that will pack it with grease. Little bit of a messy job, this one. Then I can offer my drive shaft stub up and the pin. And the pin should push out any extra. Now a really good method here is to actually, a little bit of Loctite on your grub screw, like so, and then into making sure your pin is central. And that is it. Now that is over greased, definitely, but it's inside all the critical components, so anything that's external now can be wiped off. It's really just going to make a mess. Because we packed it full of grease, we know that just by wiping it all off, it's going to be all internal where we really want it to be. Here we go. Look at that, that is so smooth, and look at the angle. And the reason that you need them is because this car has in fact got 27 degrees of lock, which is an awful lot for a buggy, and gives it a really good handling and steering characteristics. I'm going to go ahead now, put that drive shaft straight back in, put the hex on, like so. Hex on like so, lining up the pinhole. Beautiful anodized hex on this, lightweight. Getting it all lined up. Need to put a few more drops of my blue Loctite down on my pit bench. Just doing that to ensure like so. Just put a few threads worth on there. There we go. Put my 9 steps wheel wrench in there and off we go. making sure your grub screw is nice and tight. There we go. Make sure that pin's tight. Yeah, give it a final 9 steps wheel wrench, 2.5mm Allen key. That's not going anywhere. And then since that's done up, I'll go back now and double check my CV grub screw, and I can do that from just here. Oops. Where's my 2mm? Here's my 2mm driver. I can get the extra leverage then. There we go. Look at that. And that is beautifully smooth at all angles. Really nice. Fantastic job there by the HR1. Okay, now I will need to replace the hinge pin. I'll do that at a later date. I'm going to put that back in there for now, just so I don't lose it. Okay, so I can get it reassembled. I do know that the front left hinge pin needs to be replaced. I can do that at final assembly. It doesn't really matter. But the main thing for me is getting the front end together so it's all nice and can keep going on with the service. There we go. Beautiful. No binding, no movement. That is one front corner done. All bar the hinge pin. This one here. Okay, now we do exactly the same thing with the right hand side. Having a look at the front hinge pin on this side, it's also copped a whack. It's nowhere nearly as bad as the other side, but it has in fact had a whack on this side as well. But this is where we get cleaning. Cover up my grease, make sure nothing goes in there. Get cleaning on the arm. There we go. Again, same scenario, just cleaning up the mating surfaces, making sure that they're all nice and true. And then we're over to the steering spindle. There's no excessive movement or play. Get the wheel nut off. Drive shaft pin. You can see how it's all very repetitive, so you might be intimidated or overwhelmed first time you do this, but once you've rebuilt your buggy 3 or 4 times, you'll know it like the back of your hand. And if you practice good mechanics, unlike me, you'll have a really good performing and long lasting product. Drive shafts out of the way, then we can get the spindle off. Now we know that the buckets are the same top and rear, so I don't have to fuss about that this time. The screws are the same length, making it a very nice car to rebuild. These ones out. Haven't even changed the bearing yet in this build. That's pretty good for an 8-scale buggy that's had a hiding. Get those out. We'll pop the bearing out. It should come out nice and easy. Then we're left with the steering block, so we can work on that. And the reason I like to pay such close attention to the steering block is just to make sure that there's no underlying damage or issue, that it hasn't been covered up by the other parts. Really good design, this C-hub style suspension. C-hub because it does in fact look like a C. Goes over the caster block. Cleaning where the bearings sit, cleaning where the buckets go. And then we'll check the bearings over. Super happy with that. Can sit the bearings back in there before I forget. At this point now I'll check the bearing, make sure they don't need replaced. Beautiful, smooth. This one, oh, that's what makes the HR1 such a good part. It's such a good kit, is that it's made from great components. Leaves us with the caster block to check over and the drive shaft to rebuild. Again, looking for any cracks or damage, anything suspicious. Give it all a good once over. Man, it looks like now that I've had this hinge pin out, it looks like I just need a packet of outer hinge pins. And we will be off and running. Everything's really good. Just cleaning up any of the mating surfaces. Yeah, really nice. Can go ahead now and reassemble the spindle. So the bucket of the surface area goes on the inside, like my mate Panda would say, the monkey's hats. Then we have that one. The caster block goes in. And we can tell that we've got the right parts on because they all say R. R for right on this side. Funnily enough, the other one was all left-hand side. You want to make sure that you're not cross-threading or doing any damage to these threads, because if you have these in crooked or cross-threaded, not only will they be weak, but they'll also throw your wheel alignment out. Okay, that's only leaving the drive shaft left. And you guys are pros at drive shafts now, so give it a good clean off. Like I said, these CVs are my absolute favourite because they're rebuildable. They're definitely strong enough. They have enough arc. I've seen them cop an absolute hiding and stood up to a great amount of punishment, and all while being rebuildable. I know there's other brands on the market, for example, where you can't actually rebuild the universals. You just have to, when they get worn, you either just throw them out. Some of them do have replaceable pins. But this one here, the whole thing is serviceable. And the fact that it just comes apart in your hand means that there'll be nothing bent. Like so. Okay, just going to use a little bit of my WD as a solvent just to clean off that muck and mess. And then wipe it all off. And like I said, the Blue Tack doing an amazing job at actually just sucking all the dirt and the grime off of the parts that you're cleaning without having to use any nasty chemicals. There we go. Clean the hex up a little bit. Here we go, I've got the barrel here. Give us the pin. We are good. Okay. A little bit of grease and we are off. Just using a little bit of lithium grease on this. It's really nice. Hard wearing grease. It's not very sticky. It's a really light grease. Shouldn't attract too much dirt. Offer the barrel up. Press it through. Packing it with grease and then wiping off any excess as you go along. Got the pin in here. Now you want the pin, there's a flat spot on this pin, you want that facing the grub screw. Like so. Get your grub screw. Got some fresh grease in there. There you go. We'll give it a quick spin up. Buttery smooth, exactly what I expected. We know the grease is in all the good spots, so then we can wipe it all off. We don't want to risk attracting any more dirt than we have to. And all the friction points are pretty much internal anyway. Oh, that is so nice. And no slop. Really smooth. Beautiful drive shaft there. Good job to the HR1. Just let me double check that. Okay, bearings back in. Now I know I need a packet of, sorry, lost for words, packet of hinge pins. But I will, however, keep going with the rebuild, and I'll do that towards the end. Get that hinge pin in there. Just so I can keep going and get the rest of the suspension done. Still goes together really nice, and if you are in a pinch you could reuse them. You just might have a little bit of a track difference, a little bit of a bind, a little bit of a camber difference in your front end. Hinge pin retaining screw. Then go ahead and put the axle in, and apart from that outer hinge pin, the front end is all done. So again with the hex, the pin, should all be self-explanatory. a little bit of Loctite. And on it goes. There you go, make sure the pin's not coming out. We are perfect. Wheel nut back on. There's the other corner. Right, so now all that leaves is a little bit of cleaning of the front hinge pins. The front hinge pins, the inner hinge pins. Again, just cleaning up where the arms go in the metal. Not trying to remove any material really, just trying to clean up the surface to make sure there's no binding and it is all as smooth as it can be. Then at this point you could give your hinge pins a polish. In this case I'm just giving them a good clean. Making sure there's no dirt and grime on there. And we can go ahead and set our front end ready to offer up. Like so. Okay, now the next step of the build. And we all know, I think we realise that it is in fact, that's right, I thought I'd lost a nut, the front gearbox and differential. Now I'm just going to clean this off a little bit. I do love working on the rubber sweep pit mat. It is a really good surface area and takes an absolute hiding. Here we have our gearbox where we left it 20 minutes ago. We'll get this blue tack off of there and we'll get ready to strip it off. Now the only thing that we should have to take off the gearbox is the front cap, and the front differential should fall on out. And then we can get to work on rebuilding the front diff, and for that I'm going to use the finest 10,000 weight silicone oil from 9 Steps. So I'm not sure what's currently in there, we'll find out in a second. However, it is a hot summer and this buggy had so much steering that I think stepping it up a little bit in the viscosity or the thickness of the oil might calm the front down a little bit. Also give it much better drive on corner exit. And just have to take that body mount off. Body mount. That's a handy little thing. Like so. I'm going to put this screw back in here to make sure I know exactly where it comes from. And that's a good practice when you are building stuff. Okay, let's take this off and see what we're working with. First thing to note is the side of the crown wheel. And we know it's on the left hand side, so make sure it goes back on. The next is the float. And the mesh was really, really nice on this. And I'm spinning it over looking for debris. Next thing I'm going to do is take it out of the case and remove the shims. And I'm going to put them in the side that they're on. I'll put these out the way. So one on the left hand side and some on the right. I'm doing it from backwards, so left, right. 2 on the crown wheel side. like so. Okay, now I can go ahead and get some of this old grease and muck out of the way before we go any further. Now there's not a lot of loose dirt and stuff flying around, which is really nice because I cleaned it off earlier. And over here too, inside the case, get this old grease out. You can see in the past I have used copper grease, hence the copper in colour, and that's really good on hardened gears, especially when you're running in. It is a little bit heavier, can be a little bit more resistive, but it's a very, very good protectant. Once I clean this off, I should be able to see what we've had, and I have in fact had 8,000 diff oil in here before. So I've had 8, 8 and 3 as far as the diff oils go. Just giving it a rub down now, so get my hands as least messy as possible. These shims, luckily they're all the same thickness. Okay, dirty rag, cleaner rag. And I suppose give a good clean off now to save any dirt and debris going into the open diff assembly and risk making more mess than it's worth. Okay, it has had a good, and again with my infamous blue tack, getting the last of the dirt and debris off. Here we go. Now that feels so nice. It is still buttery smooth. It's not all watery. Now let's have a look-see at the gears. Let's see if I can't zoom in on that. Oh, so you can see here it's still got a tiny bit of copper paste left, but have a look at it. It is really nice. It's barely even polished up. That is a really nice mesh. The gears are in really good condition, and I'm really happy to reuse that. Not only reuse the gear, but really happy with the way that it's been meshed. There we go. Looking really, really nice. Nice bearings. Looking good. Now let's have a look at the other case. Now this is the pinion gear in there, and you can see here the tooth profile. Again, looking really, really good. As I spin that around, no dirt and debris, there's no chunks missing, there's no pitting, there's no filings. That is really nice. Really great to see. I'm really relieved about that. I thought it would be. It's been running really nice and not making any noise. So now I'm going to get my kitchen towel out. Nice clean square, and we'll get to work on stripping this diff down. See how much mess we can make. And I know from the fluid in the rear diff that the 9-step silicone should be in good condition. It feels really nice. I'm expecting it to be a bit grey. However, it's not going to be all black and full of debris, and shouldn't be all sparkly from metal filings from the gears. Being an all steel gearbox as far as the internals, so the cross pins, hardened chrome, the gears, steel. When the mesh isn't right, they do definitely let you know. Let's have a look. Bit of stiction there. Hopefully the gasket's all right. Come off all nice. Oh, have a look at that. We'll zoom in a little bit. So here we can see the colour of the fluid, and as I stamp it off, see it's coming nice and grey. That's exactly what I wanted to see. I want to avoid any oils going into. Got my 9 steps gizmo here. I'm going to pick these bevels out. like so. Really nice. Hasn't been overheated. I mean, yes, it's been used, but definitely has not been used to the point of really cooking that oil. Really nice, nice and viscous. I'm gonna go ahead, get my little container, let that drain into there for a bit. So we know that that is the diff casing, and here is the top of the diff. The crown wheel side, and I'll keep it all separated on my rag so I can in fact assemble it as it came apart. Looking at the out drives, looking at the condition of the bearings, and no leaks, which is really nice. Get my O-ring out. Now this will be the third diff you guys have seen me do, so it's all very much same from here on, I'm afraid. Once you've done one 8 scale diff, you've probably done them all. They're all very similar in design. They do vary a little bit in construction, but as long as you maintain good principles of cleaning and assembly. Oh, look at that. There's no dirt in behind the O-ring. The casing is really nice. A little bit of discoloration and had a bit of condensation on the back of the gear at some point, but that's fine. The O-ring will be in really good condition. Everything is going to be reusable, hopefully. We're just going to check this bearing out. Let's have a look at this out drive. And the front diff in this car's had less torture, it looks like, than the other two. So it's been a really good balance of setup so far. I am going to, like I said, I am going to go heavier. I went heavier in the other two diffs, so I'm going to go heavier in this one. So it was 8, 8 and 3. It's now going to go 10, 7 and 5. Here you go, just to give it some more drive out of the corners. Turn that over, let that oil drain off. We'll clean that bearing up, and hopefully there's no grittiness about it. Like I said, not being somebody who uses compressed air on my cars, I don't usually have to change bearings every rebuild because I haven't filled the bearings themselves full of grit and mud and everything. Now this car has been used by others, been sent into state, but I'm pretty sure so far I'm the only person to have serviced it, which is an even better sign, really, a testament to the car and the quality of the components. Oh, beautiful smooth bearing. I'm going to get right back in there with the crown side assembly. Again, just on this out drive, I'm just going to put a slight amount, again with my gizmo tool, a slight amount of the lithium grease, just in that groove in the out drive, just to keep it all running nice and smooth. Pack it with a little bit of grease, and I think that that's going to keep it lasting quite a long time. Now on the O-ring side, I'm going to use O-ring grease, funnily enough, rubber safe. That's going to help me get a magnificent seal and prolong the life of the O-ring. Two things which are both positives. So the bearings, I'm going to offer the out drive up. Got my 7mm driver here over the O-ring to the perfect size. Like so, push the O-ring into place, and I can put my drive pin back in, and that will hold it all together. Now the gasket is in really good condition too, which I like, and that's because I grease my surfaces If you've seen my other ones, there's been no leak on this diff. There's going to be no need for further parts replacement. There you go. So that'll sit to the side. That is the top assembly. Turn that gear over and we can get to my favourite bit, a little bit more cleaning. A little bit more cleaning, and that really gives you a chance to get everything in your hands, look at everything, how things are wearing, the condition of the parts. You know, you can appreciate the engineering into it. And usually if you grow to love the Buggy. The more time I spend working on it and getting to know it, getting to love the Buggy, or whatever car it is you're working on. These gears are in great condition. The bevels are in really good nick. The shims are really good. The oil not being completely violated and abused will let me know that, you know, as much as I'm going to clean all the debris off and get the old oil out, there's nothing wrong with leaving traces of the old oil in there, because it's not that bad. Have a look at the white cloth. I mean, it's nearly black where the nearly perfectly white where the oil's getting cleaned off onto. A really good sign that we haven't been overheating it. Good. Okay, now the front diff housing, front diff case. This is the messiest part, always is the messiest part. Get this oil off of here. Okay, got a 2mm grub screw in the side of the case here. Holds the oil in is one thing, and also makes you able to get the pin out. The inner pin that holds comes out the side of the case like so. Take the out drive out, bearing, and then the O-ring. Again, you can see I'm using the gizmo in there, and that's to make sure I'm not causing that bearing any harm. Using a hobby knife or a hex head or something like that would be less than ideal. I want to try and keep the integrity of that O-ring seal. There's no dirt and grime behind there, which is a really nice sign. You can wash it out in a bit of shell light, kerosene I've seen people use, but given the fact that it's not that dirty, it's not going to pose me a big problem in the confidence. Pushing my favourite blue tack in there. Beautiful. There we go. Okay, clean the out drive, check the bearing, and we go again. And some things you just can't rush. Yes, if you're doing a really crazy rebuild, you could in fact change all the bearings, can change all the fluids, all the pins, all the gaskets. But if you look after them, you really shouldn't need to. Now I'm filling the diff full of blue tack because I am going to face the gasket area. Now I'm just using a bit of 800 9 steps sanding stick, just very lightly. And what that's going to do is going to reveal any part of it which is not flat. I'm not trying to remove any material really. See, it's all perfectly matte. So that tells me that it's all perfectly flat. We've got a few moulding dots, that's fine, that's the factory moulds. But there's no raised points, there's no ridges, there's no scores. So really happy for that to go back in. And the reason that I put the blue tack in there is so that no of that swarf actually went into the case, like so. That is one in a gearbox case, really clean. You can see here it's nice and shiny in the bottom here. That's because when I did rebuild it last, I did put CA on it. You can check the outdrive for any slop in the diff. There is none, as I'd expect. It hasn't even worn any hardening from the outdrive. It's really nice, surface coated. Very typical of what I'm seeing so far with this complete rebuild. Is that the Buggy itself, the HR1, is in great shape. No reason that we're going to have leaking diff, noisy gearboxes or any failed components. Again with the O-ring, exactly the same as I did in the top side. Just getting it not to stick to your fingers a hard bit, or your tool. There we go. That's all the rubber grease for that. The outdrive, just a little dab, like I said, just in this groove, just to make sure that we are going to give us years of service. Years of service, depends how much we use it, I suppose. Beautiful smooth bearing into the boss. And where's my favourite 7mm driver gone? Oh. Like so. Put my cross pin in, which is a lot harder to do on camera than you'd think. And then I put my little grub screw back in the side here. Now when you're doing this grub screw up, it's important you don't do it up all the way, because it will just come through the case and act on the back of the bevel and in fact ruin your gear mesh. So just want to tighten up till it's flush with the inner case, exactly like now, so I can feel that there's no step that the hobby knife is getting dragged on. Making sure that everything is nice and clean. Get my pin nice and straight from the top, and then I'm going to start putting some oil in. Now, like I said to you before, I'm going to step it up a bit, go up from 8,000 up to 10,000 9 steps oil. Nice, thick, pure silicone. Now I'm putting it, you can see me, I'm putting it from the cross pins down, just to make sure that, to aid assembly. And instead of just putting all the oil in at once, I just, a little bit like a sandwich, just put it a little bit in each, every layer of gear. Okay. Bottom gear. Get that located, feel it drop into situ. Hard to capture on camera, easy to feel with your finger. Then I'll put one set of bevels in. Have the relief on the cross pin facing up. A little bit more oil. Working from the sides down. And then second cross pin with the relief facing down, like so. Get my gizmo tool in there, so get all this grease off, push it in, and it should all just go in nicely. At this point here, I like to just sort of give it just a little turn from the outdrive. Not a full rotation or anything, because I don't want to introduce a load of air, but just to make sure all the gears are seated and in mesh correctly. and then I'll go ahead and add some more oil. Again, 10,000 weight, starting to get up there in thickness, but it's really going to help this buggy drive out of the corners, I think. Not that there was a problem before. Okay, of about 75% of the way full in the gearbox case, and you can use a holder or a shock stand or something. I'm just making it difficult for myself by not. And I've said it in every video, the main thing that you want to be careful of when you do your diffs is in fact to not get any diff fluid into your holes here in the case, because unless you've had the forethought and actually drilled the relief all the way through, which most people haven't, myself included in this car, you will get a hydraulic lock and in fact strip your threads before you even get up to closing the surfaces down, resulting in a leaking or failing diff and gearbox. So we want that 75% of the way full, and I've filled it at every little step along the way. Now I can go ahead and offer up the top. Last step is just put a little bit of, for me, putting a little bit of rubber grease on the housing, and that's just to ensure I get a really nice seal, giving me the best chance of also sealing and reusing the gasket next time around. Just a little smear, really liberal. And like this time, the gasket, like next time, hopefully the gasket should be fully reusable. Okay, now I have got the, you can see the top gear here is facing with the top pin straight up. So hopefully, if I've got this one centrally located, and on camera can be a little bit more difficult than it's proven in the past, should be able to offer that straight up and in. Let's see how we go. Okay, now I don't like to get these casings together yet until I've got these screws started, because the last thing I want to do is, if you have overfilled your diff, not that I have in this case, but you want to make sure that no diff fluid can get into your screw holes. Not only that, but we want to make sure that our diff case is kept really flat and integral, giving us a good seal and a great gear mesh. Okay. Now they are quite long screws, but if you do tap the casing, thread tap, it does make your life really quite enjoyable as far as not being tight on your hands and wrecking your tools. All the screws going in nice. Getting this pulled down nice and evenly across the face. Not tightening them up at all yet, just absolutely just seating to make sure that the mesh and all the pins are correct before I anywhere near tightening up this diff case. Making sure that it's all pulled down square, which should be about now. It's feeling beautifully smooth, which is a good sign. We'll continue to tighten down. It's basically just building itself, this diff. Not like the last one I did, which took me 3 attempts, but that's okay. Okay, now that is the point now where they are, the screws have just seated. So I'm not tightening it yet. Give my hands a wipe off. And how does it feel? Oh, feels beautiful. Really happy with that. So I can go ahead now, everything's meshing really nice. Get this dirty cloth out of the way. I can go ahead now and torque down Get the oil away, torque down the crown wheel, get this diff assembled, going across the face of the gasket. It's important just to do a little bit, make sure they're all getting evenly tightened. Yes, they have to be tight, but shouldn't be any tighter than just hand tools. Working my way around. You can see it's taken a few goes, and I'm just making sure that it's all going down nice and even. There we go. Really am happy with that. Okay, give it a final wipe off, and we are getting ready to go in, back into the gearbox. One thing I do have to do though is just label with what I've put on. Final rotate for my own OCD measures, and a final torque, knowing that I have given it every opportunity of being the best diff possible. Haven't used a single new part so far. Everything's been really serviceable and fully rebuildable. Okay, I will however label what's on it, and it's 10. 10, 10, funnily enough. And put an X over here. X marks the spot. There we go, Roman numeral. Okay. Now before I put these shims back in, I'm going to clean them. I'm going to make sure there's no dirt and grime in between the faces of the shims, because that can in fact alter the shimage and the gear mesh of the front gearbox, any gearbox. So I'm just cleaning them off, wiping them on the silicone mat, and that is almost like polishing them as well, giving me the confidence that there's no grit and grime in between each and every one. And if I do have to alter the gear mesh and reset it, that's fine. That's definitely an adjustment worth taking your time with. Just offering it up to the gearbox, making sure that those shims are seated correctly. We've got a nice gear mesh look in there. Now I can go ahead straight away and offer up the front cover. Let's get this gearbox together. Now you can't really check final gear mesh settings. You can check along the way, but you can't check final gear mesh settings until the D block is screwed up on these. Screwed up, I mean torqued up. Where's my 2.5 mil? I am looking at it somewhere, I bet. I have misplaced my own tool. Classic Brett. Here we go. So this is the buggy going back together. This is really good. Getting the front end done is a good sign. Usually I start from the rear. I like to do all 3 diffs at once. That's a really good way to do it, because you can just do it like a bit of a production line. Put on the front case. Check in mesh as we go. Now it is going to sound a little bit echo and stuff. It does have no lube on it yet. Checking for float as we go. Looking really good. We know the bearings are good. Got a little bit of end float on the pinion, which is nice. It's going to allow for flex and heat expansion. We've got a tiny little bit of left and right on the crown. Again, and we've got about 2 thou of free play. Now let's hope as we squeeze up this casing that doesn't in fact change greatly. So it's pretty simple. Oops, put these, got my pill blocks to put back in. Give these a good clean. Like so. Got them back in. Sway bars. Now I like to get these pill blocks in first. It all sort of comes together at once, making it just a little bit awkward. Here we go. Get these pills in. 5.5 mil. This one, full range of adjustment on the HR1 too, allowing all to kick up adjustment. If I can get this nut started, falling apart. Here we go. Another 5.5 mil driver on the front. I love the way they do up to a shoulder on the hinge pins, so you can really tighten up the hinge pins and they have no flex on the gearbox and the arms. Everything being nice and smooth. Again, checking gear mesh as we go along. Beautiful. I'll go ahead now and put in these. These are the ones here which will really tighten down on the diff case. They hold the whole front end together, hence why they're so long and large. So they're 3.5 mil diameter, 42 mil I think long. And they go from the front of the gearbox case all the way into the back, making the HR1 super strong. Looking really good. Again, just doing it nice and evenly. Nothing has to be tighter than hand tight. It's not going to rattle apart. Gear mesh, sublime, absolutely beautiful. So we've still got our free play across the crown wheel, about 1 thou. Again, we've got 1 to 2 thou of free play on the pinion, and then across the pinion itself, hear that little knock? Probably got about 1.5 thou. There we go. These are going to be beautiful. Like I said, it sounds a little bit echoey and stuff. It is dry, but now we can go ahead and do up our drive shafts, do up our sway bars, our camber links, and we are gold. We are done. That is the front end complete. Front end including gearbox and diff assembly. Here you go. And then my 9 steps full tools proving to be absolutely perfect for this job. Okay, now you can see why I left the camber links in there. Goes exactly where it came from. That's nearly too nice to use. It's amazing, isn't it, what we one lap later it will look exactly like it did before I started this whole project. Amazing the tough condition that they operate in and how well they operate. These 8 scale buggies really cop a punishment, and they love it. Absolutely love it. Put on such a great show. Put my drive shaft in. Oops. Old swapsies. One of the last things left to do is going to be to obviously do a little bit of chassis tidy up before the clips go in, and then the shock rebuild. And I never like to do that until like the day or the day before competition. The shocks, here we go. Look at that, that is so free. There is no squeaking, no movement. And that is with also considering we both know that I need to change the hinge pins, the outer hinge pins. They're both a little bit bent. I'm going to go to the spare parts bin, I'm going to stick them in. But apart from that, this thing is absolutely gold. Now I will be lubing up these gearboxes, the front and the rear. I'll be doing that at final assembly because obviously when I offer grease up here, it puts grease everywhere and it attracts any dirt and stuff. While it's nice and dry, nothing will come and go from there. And that front end is ready to go. So that is fantastic. So that has been part 3 of the HR1 build, service and repairs. This one included the front suspension unit, the drive shafts, the gearbox and differential. So quite a big build, ready to hit the track just about. I'm Brett from Hearns, and thanks for watching.